friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here for the first in a new series that I'm starting called Random Tips. And this will be about various different topics. Now, it sort of goes in line with the Frequently Asked Questions series and is also going to be a little bit similar to the this and that. The differences is that I'm going to be focusing on a single subject like I normally do in my Frequently Asked Questions, but I might be covering several different things besides just one dedicated answer to a question. So sometimes it might just be one, and sometimes it might be 3 or 4 different tips that I'm throwing in about that subject. Today it's going to be about dehydrating. Now, I've had a couple people mention that they've had their items go moldy in their jars after they've sealed them, even though they were sure that they were fully dry. Well, there's a reason why this can happen. So right here, I just opened this jar of 2019 stinging nettle. When your herbs are fully dried on there, whether it be you're drying them in the sun or in your homemade dehydrators or an electric dehydrator, or even next to your wood stove on the cooler days when you have a fire going, your herbs in particular should be very crispy. You should be able to crumble them in your fingers. If they don't crumble and they just kind of stick together, they're not fully dry. So you need to make sure they're fully dry. Now, when you're drying fruit, that's a little more tricky, because when you're dehydrating fruits, they're more likely to become more like a leather and still be pliable, and they can still be fully dry. Vegetables can tend to get crispy, but it always is going to depend on the vegetable or the fruit, or how thinly sliced they are. Now, if you're freeze drying the items, they should always turn out crisp. We personally do not have a freeze dryer, but I do know that freeze-dried foods of any kind always get crisp and can be easily powdered. And that's what makes freeze-drying nice, as well as the fact that freeze-drying tends to hold the color, flavor, and nutrients better than dehydrating, but dehydrating holds the nutrients better than canning does. So I did do a video talking about the differences as far as nutrient values and just kind of deciding what's best for you when it comes to preserving your foods, that I will link to down below. And they all have their benefits. And even though we don't have a freeze dryer, I will purchase some freeze-dried foods because I like what I can do with them. But I also like to dehydrate a lot of my own foods and like the texture. Like, I like the texture of dehydrated mushrooms over freeze-dried mushrooms, but I'll have both on hand because they have different uses. So that's just a little side tip there. But anyway, so once you know your things are fully dry, this is where it gets super important, is if they are still warm, do not package them up in your jars and seal them. This is what's going to be most likely to cause mold, even on fully dried items. Either leave them on your tray until they're fully cooled down, or like I usually do with my herbs, even if they're still warm, I'll put them in the jar, but I'll leave the lid off the jar until things are fully cooled. Now, actually be quicker to leave them on the trays, but they tend to cool down very quickly anyway. But when you're talking fruits like apples, pears, peaches, I always leave them on the tray until they're fully cool, because especially since I'm using the cloth, they do peel off the cloth a lot better once they're fully dried. And if you want to see a video on how to make these, I do recommend these. I know I mention them a lot, but there's always new people coming in. Make your own cloth covers for any kind of trays. I don't care if it's your Excalibur, if it's a Nesco, or even your rack for your wood stove like we have. You can see in this picture here how I have, they're just old cotton sheets, clean cotton sheets that I've cut up. I haven't even bothered to hem them because even after several washings, they only fray just a little bit. So anyway, you can check out that video. I'll link down below. But yes, I'll leave them. Fruits and vegetables, I leave until they're fully cooled because they'll come off of the cloth better. But herbs cool down very quickly, and usually I'll try to get those off of there right away. I don't like to leave them out for too long. As soon as they're cooled, you want to get them in your jars, because if you leave herbs out for too long, they very quickly start to absorb the humidity from the air. Now, if you live in a dry climate, that might not be an issue, but here we have very high humidity. So I have to get things jarred up right away. So what happens if you put your items into your jars and then seal it up, or bags or whatever it is you're sealing it in, while they're still warm? What will happen is it will cause sweat. It'll cause condensation to build up inside your container, and then that moisture will be reabsorbed by the whatever you've got in there, and then they will mold, no matter how well you have them sealed. If there's moisture in there, it is going to make your things mold. Now, another quick tip, I did mention the cloth liners, but another quick tip I wanted to mention when it comes to drying herbs, this won't work for fruits and vegetables, but when you're talking about herbs, especially anything that is very lightweight, like your mints, including oregano, rosemary, thyme, any of these, I tend to pile them on high. Not like with your fruit pieces, we like to spread them out a little bit more so they'll dry better. You don't want to layer them. But when I'm putting herbs on my trays, like I've got here with these valerian leaves, I just pile them on. I pile them on until they're so high that I can't put another tray on top of it without causing it to sit up too high. And it doesn't matter that they're laying over the top of each other, they will dry very quickly. Not all herbs. Some more dense herbs you won't be able to get away with this, but herbs that have, you know, you can see what happens there is there's a lot of airspace in there. So because of that airspace, yes, you can pile them high. You do not have to put your herb leaves like this and spread them out like that. You can put 2 or 3 layers on one tray and then make the most of your tray. So I do that with all of my herbs. But again, this will not work well for fruits and vegetables. You will definitely increase the dehydrating time because it takes a very long time for them to dry if they're piled on top of each other. And then one more quick tip that I also say quite a bit is when you're dehydrating mixed items together, no matter what dehydrator you have, put the items that take the longest to dehydrate towards the heat source. So if you have a Nesco like I do that has a heat element on top and the fan, I put the heavier items on top. For example, right now I have some organic orange peels drying and they're heavier. They can handle higher heats. I have them on the top. And underneath that I have some nettle. I'm going to be out picking some dandelions here pretty soon and putting those on there. And then those will most likely go underneath the orange peels and on top of the nettle. These ones are a little more delicate, the valerian leaves, so these will go on the very bottom. If I was dehydrating more thyme today or other very delicate items, they would go on the very, very bottom. And you can usually tell by just how thin the leaf on something is. The more thin they are, the more delicate they're going to be. So put those items towards the bottom. Okay, so there's my random tips on dehydrating, and be watching for more random tips on various other topics from laundry to canning to whatever that I'll be coming out with in the near future. And please feel free to put your random tips on this particular topic of dehydrating in the comment section down below so others can read your comments and learn from you as well. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.